Well, hello there, and welcome to the recording of episode 16 of Search Marketing Scoop, the podcast brought to you by Semrush. So this is just a little bit of an informal hello before we get going full on. I'm just checking that all the videos that I've got going on here are working. Everything seems to be live, and we're going as we should be. So this is recording a podcast, audio podcast on video. The podcast itself is available, of course, to subscribe to in iTunes and other Android podcatchers as well. So whatever your flavor of podcatcher, feel free to search for Search Marketing Scoop inside that. And hopefully you can become an audio podcast subscriber as well if you're not already. But you can watch it live being recorded here. And hopefully, if this is your first time here, hi. Hopefully video will add a little something to the mix. If you're in the audience, we've got some people just starting to watch us live now. Say hi in the chat. Where in the world are you watching us from? It would be good just to find out a little bit more about you and what kind of things you happen to be doing in your digital marketing lives at the moment. So are you involved in SEO? Are you involved in paid search and content marketing? Are you digital marketing generalists? It would be good just to get a feel for the kind of areas of focus that you actually have within your day-to-day roles. We've got Josh watching from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Welcome, Josh. Great to have you on here. So anyone else watching live, feel free to share where you're from. I know it's not just Josh watching. There's quite a few other people starting to come into the live audience now. So whoever you are, don't be shy. Say hi at the beginning here. Collins Brook Group. Hi from Houston, Texas, USA. I knew that was the USA. Maybe some people didn't. Dustin DeTorres from Orlando, Florida. Hi, Dustin. Great to have you on. We've got Kevin from Dublin, Ireland. We've got Clifford from upstate New York, and we've got the chat starting to move a little fast now, so I'm not catching everyone. Kirsten Drysdale, great to see you again on here. Good to have you on last week as well. We've got Madeline in Seattle. So quite a few people in the States. I'm sure we'll have some more people from other countries joining us as well. We've usually got a few people from the UK, usually got a few people from India and a couple of other countries in Europe as well. So wherever you're joining from, welcome. Great to have you on board. Hopefully you've seen a few episodes of Search Marketing Scoop before. Alex from Dublin, Ireland. Hello, Alex. Great to have you on board as well. So it's great to have you on here. We've got three wonderful guests actually joining me today. So I won't give them a proper introduction until the proper start of the show, which is just going to be in the next few seconds. So I'm going to stop this informal chat here and click on the record audio button to get all the audio saved. And I'm going to give you a better, more proper introduction just in a second here. So let me click on my intro music and we'll get going with the podcast recording proper. It's okay to place reviews from elsewhere on your website. Google's exact match close variants expand again? And why did a blog post about Vine shutting down do so well for this social media expert? Broadcasting live on the Semrush YouTube channel, this is Search Marketing Scoop, the Semrush show that brings together the top PPC, SEO, and content marketing folk to discuss the current search headlines and how to improve your digital marketing success. Hi there, I'm your host, David Bain. Let's meet today's guests. So first up, a chap who's been in SEO for the last 17 years. He's based in Glasgow, Scotland, and describes himself as an all-round good guy. Welcome to the Scoop from Craig Campbell SEO, Craig Campbell.
Thank you, David. I'm not sure where you get the all-round good guy. I remember writing that somewhere, but I'm not sure. Is that
That was your Twitter bio?
Yeah.
Yeah. So other two guests, be scared of what's in your Twitter bio. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I'll need to change that now. That was done on a drunken Saturday night, I think.
It could have been a lot worse, I'm sure. Then.
Yeah.
Next up, a PPC expert who describes himself on Twitter as a flannel timepiece and a fancy shoe enthusiast, whatever that means.
I'm trying to think of a way to show off the fancy shoes, but that might take a little bit of stretching that I'm not capable of doing right now.
Well, he's from Elite SEM. You just heard him. Welcome, Aaron Levy.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, for our content marketing close-up feature, an award-winning social media blogger who claims to be fluent in Star Wars and Klingon. Welcome, the social media hat, Mike Alton.
Thanks, David. May the force be with you.
Indeed, and you as well, sir. So, 3 great guests there, but let's go back to Craig for story number 1, and that is, it's okay to place reviews from elsewhere onto your website. John Mueller said so on Twitter, that it's fine to publish reviews from elsewhere on the web on your website. So, Craig, what's this one all about?
I mean, people, I think, obviously encouraging people to see reviews on your website, whether it's via testimonial pages and something or something, is quite important to do, just to show people that, you do have live real reviews, and it can encourage click-through rate and stuff like that. But obviously, I think what John was saying is, you can do it, but don't abuse it. There's going to be a potential duplicate content issue there if you're going to do it at mass or whatever. So, what he's saying there is, you can embed it there. What I'd maybe even do would be to possibly put up an image of the review that was left on Yelp or whatever it might be. And I think that's always going to be a good thing. I think people overcomplicate duplicate content, if I'm being honest. I don't think it's that bad if you're using it as an example, as John said, or something to refer to. It's if you're going to be doing that en masse, then you are going to be hit with issues regarding duplicate content. But yeah, I think adding these reviews from third-party websites, why not show off some of the good work you've done? Regardless of what niche you're in, you want a pat in the back. If you're a roofer and you've done some great work, why not show your customers more about that? Because the reality is, who looks at Yelp? Not everyone. Have it on your website and showcase, because your website is your shop window, and I think to some degree show off some of those good reviews.
I think many people in the States look at Yelp, or at least more at Yelp than people in the UK. But you said en masse there. What is en masse? Is en masse a certain percentage that you shouldn't go over, or is it more than a handful?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's a certain percentage or whatever. It's not something I've tried and tested, to be perfectly honest. It's great to post them here and there. I would say, adding loads and loads of reviews onto your website that's all duplicate content, I would say you potentially have problems. And I think there's no need. People are not going to read a million reviews about you. I think just placing them wherever, it really depends on the website, but certainly there's no need to put on 50 reviews on a page or a blog post or whatever it may be. I think, chucking up 2 or 3 is ideal to get your point across. And then if people do want to dig deeper and find more reviews about you, then they can go and, type in, whatever your website is and then reviews.
Is it worthwhile trying to rank your website for your brand name reviews and trying to get number 1 for that? Or is that kind of old SEO and there's too many review sites about now and you shouldn't worry about people discovering third-party review sites about you, first of all?
It depends on what type of business you run. There are certain people that want to try and bury the reviews and not have those reviews on a third-party website. And if you do tend to attract any kind of negative reviews, then you maybe want to rank well for your business and then reviews. But it's not something I would actively go out my way to do. I think third-party review, it's all about honesty. Everyone's going to get good and bad reviews anyway, regardless of who you are. Not everyone's going to like me personally. They might have had a run-in with me or a disagreement, and so be it. But I think it looks perfectly natural if there is an element of bad stuff out there as well.
Do you encourage your clients to be proactive about asking for reviews from their customers?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, click-through rate is a big thing. And reviews are likely to encourage clicks. People see good reviews, then it's going to lead to, engagement with your page or your website, and that's overall going to help your SEO. I'm not going to sit here and say reviews help your SEO, because through my testing and whatnot, they don't make a blind bit of difference. But the click-through rate part of it does make a difference. So I would actively encourage people to get reviews. I think it buys an element of trust, especially Google reviews. And stuff like that. There's nothing better than seeing, a 4 or a 5-star thing get on rather than someone with 2 stars. People might not think too much about it, but they just, the brains just scan it. And if you see a 2-star, then it's going to flag up, I would say. So I think, encouraging people to review is always good.
Now, in the live chat here on YouTube, we've got Irving Weiss saying, aren't reviews copyrighted? How can we just copy them from somewhere like Yelp? Do you think it's okay to do that? And I know you're not a lawyer, but I'm aware that in the States that you can take a small amount of content and reference that. And I would guess that if you're just doing a small amount and referencing the original site, it would be okay. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would say it'd be perfectly. I mean, as you said, I'm not a lawyer, but I think if someone's referring to you and your business and reviewing your business, there's nothing wrong with taking it from a third-party website and referring to it, on occasion or whatever. I don't see that being a problem. I think if you were going out your way and doing it with every Yelp review, for example, then you may have a bit of a problem. But I think, in a much smaller scale, I don't see there being a major problem.
But just make sure it's a no-follow link back to the other site.
Yeah, obviously. Don't share that juice.
So let's go over to Aaron for story number 2, and that is Google's exact match close variants expand again. So Aaron, what's this all about?
Well, I think it's a bit foolish that Google is still using the word exact. About a year and a half ago, they switched it to close variants, which included things like fat fingers, slight misspellings, people using slightly different keyboards, basically to account for people, doing things in mobile. Whereas now, as of I guess Friday, exact match or exact-ish will now include metaphors, similar meaning words, close meanings. Basically, it's a much more refined version of modified broad match at this point. It's a little silly, but
why is it a little silly?
So it's a little silly in the sense that they're still referring back to the old traditional match types, again, calling it exact, but with close variants and subtle differences and maybe different flavors if we feel like it. It's a little silly. I think they should have just rebranded and created something new. Really what this is more of evidence of is that Google's not taking away, I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing, but they're adjusting the focus of search marketers. So paid search historically was all about keywords. That was the lever that we had. We would build as many levers as possible and turn the right ones. Whereas now there's so many more signals available. They're getting much more intense in terms of audience bidding. There's a number of options that aren't available to us that only Google can handle, like operating system or up to the minute time of day bidding, or things like that. That there's just so many signals available that what they claim to have been observing and what we've heard from our Google reps is, since so many people were stuck in the Stone Age in terms of search optimizing the keywords only, they were leaving so much on the table. So what we expect is that this is more of a play into turning on Google's smart bidding, letting them auto optimize your campaigns since they have more signals available.
Okay.
So this gives Google a couple more tools to play with versus just playing the sandbox that we set up for them.
So are most people a little bit concerned about giving Google the full power to make decisions essentially on their behalf instead of attempting to be hyper focused and just focusing on certain keyword phrases?
If you browse around Twitter and just do a couple of searches for the article itself and get the sentiment, you will see a lot of tinfoil hats. You will see a lot of this is just a money grab. You will see a lot of Google's taking away control from me, when in reality, it's in a sense just forcing people into a new era. In my opinion, over the next year or two, Google search and paid search is going to function a lot more like media buying, like display buying, where it's more about audience intent signals, things like operating system, time of day, location, proximity to their home, interests, web browsing behavior, things like that. It'll be taking into account far more signals than did they just search for Semrush.
And is this 100% good for advertisers, or do advertisers have a valid reason to be concerned about this?
I'm both excited and concerned at the same time. So I'll tell a brief story of about a year ago when Google first alpha'd their smart bidding, which is essentially letting Google take full control of bidding. So we had a Google rep who told us, the way that smart bidding works the best is if you get rid of match types. You put a handful of keywords in on broad match, give us a CPA target and let it go. We all had our tinfoil hats on too. Like, there's no way this is going to work. This particular client was very complicated. It was an industrial supply measurement company. So they're like measuring when stuff is too hot and they turn off machines. So like, there's no way Google can figure out all these signals. So we did a couple of category tests where we gave Google free reign, put a couple of broad keywords, set a CPA target and let it run, measuring it versus the number of categories that we were managing ourselves. Google won, and it was a little scary, but in a sense, it was a little bit validating as well. So it's encouraging from that perspective. It's discouraging and concerning from a different perspective in that this is how all of us have done this for 12 to 15 years. So it's not going to be as simple as we have to tweak our accounts and structure them a little bit differently. We're going to have to blow everything up and start it anew.
So if an agency was training a new start who hadn't been in digital marketing for the first time, is it still appropriate for them to learn about exact match bidding to begin with?
I think it is. I don't think that exact match will totally go away or campaign segmentation will totally go away. I don't think anytime soon will we have put in your credit card, give Google a goal and let it go. That's not going to happen anytime soon. But what I do think will happen, and if someone is getting into the industry right now, their evolution should be more about sending signals, programming how machine learning works, and less about how do you stack exact match versus broad match to tell the machine where to go. Instead, you have to give the machine guardrails and let it learn in the right places. Similar to the way that Google Shopping works now, or Google's dynamic search ads. It's going to be the same thing, I think, for search. So the ideas of keyword sculpting and things like that will apply, but it won't be the same as it was yesterday.
And just one other question in relation to this. You mentioned CPA a couple of times there. Is return on an ad spend now a preferred metric, or CPA just as useful?
So it's interesting. We've tested both. We work with a number of large scale marketplaces, not Amazon, but things like Amazon, which can look at both a return on ad spend versus a CPA. So we've tested one against another. Ironically, what we found at this phase in the machine learning is that if you feed too many signals in, the machine can get a little wacky. So ROAS, since it's dependent on the basket composition and people, maybe someone just orders 50 of something and it sets the machine askew. It's getting better at learning it, but to date, we've seen actually more success with, even for e-commerce companies, you set a CPA target based on your average order value and let the machine optimize that way. Whereas if you give it a return on ad spend target, it can go a little haywire.
Right. Okay. And that's, you mentioned e-commerce. So obviously, you've been testing it in different industries, and that's generally across the board.
Yes. Yep. It's been these Google machine learning things. They're for real. They're a big company. I think Google just figured out poker. It had figured out Go forever ago, which was very easy because it's a bunch of dots. But the machine has started to figure out poker. It can bluff. It can lie. It can figure out human signals. It's getting good.
Scary, but good at the same time. So remember, dear listener, over the next few weeks on The Scoop, we're going to be experimenting with a few new show features. So we'd love to get your feedback, whether it's in the live chat, as a rating or a review. We're talking about that earlier. If you're a podcast audio listener, obviously in iTunes, somewhere like that, we'll try and incorporate as much of the feedback that you give as possible in future shows. Let's move on to another segment just now called Content Marketing Close-Up. So today we're looking at an article called What Happened to Vine, which was published on the socialmediahat.com. And Mike is with us to discuss this. So, Mike, tell us the story behind this article.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points or aspects to it that I found really interesting. The first is that this was a newsjacking article, and I'll go into what that means in a second. It was a newsjacking article published almost exactly 2 years ago. So it wasn't intended to be an evergreen post. It wasn't intended to rank for anything. The original intent was to just share information. It was late on a Thursday afternoon, so it wasn't even ideal publishing time. But I happened to be looking at my Feedly RSS feeds, and I noticed that Vine, this is the old social network where you publish 6-second videos, they were still alive at the time, and they had published a blog post that said important news about Vine. So I clicked through and I read it, and in short, it was their announcement that they were closing down. And at the time, I think they had over 100 million monthly users. That might be wrong in terms of numbers, but it was one of the top 8 most popular social networks. And at the time, I knew that was going to be big news to my audience. And as I was reading through Vine's own blog post about what had happened, I found myself asking a lot of questions and wondering why they were doing it, what was going to happen next, and so on. And I decided to write up my own version of the event. So that's the newsjacking component, right? I wrote an article saying, "Hey, Vine is shutting down." I phrased it as a question: "What's happening to Vine?" Because at the moment it was in present tense. And I summarized their blog post, and I tried to think about whatever questions my audience might have. For instance, what do they do now? Where do they go? What networks do they use now? And I tried my best to answer them, and published that, as I said, late on a Thursday afternoon. Within the next 24 hours, that article went viral. It had, I think, 25 to 30,000 page views over the next day. It got shared by a lot of influencers because, quite frankly, nobody else had really written about it. Because I was aware of the event and I jumped in early enough, the newsjacking could not have been better. Nobody else had published anything about it. You couldn't have found it on TechCrunch or anything like that before my article. So it had a really huge initial boost in traffic and views and so on. The other interesting thing then that I did was I kept updating that article. So as Vine came out with an update a week, 3 weeks later, hey, you're going to be able to download all your Vines and archive them using this tool, I added that to the post. I added when they talked about how you still had the Vine app to create videos and you would just share them to Twitter. I pushed that in there and kept that post updated all the way through to January of 2017 when Vine actually shut down. And that's when I started to pay attention to 2 things. First, the article was getting a bunch of traffic every single day, and it was almost all organic at that point. At that moment, it was probably up to 400 or 500 visits a day. It was the number one article, the number one result in an organic search for what's going on with Vine or what's happening with Vine. And then after Vine actually shut down, which, like I said, I think that was the end of January 2017, the search changed. People were no longer searching on what's happening with Vine because Vine's now dead, right? So they rephrased it in the past tense. And like Aaron was just saying, that probably wouldn't matter today. But 2 years ago, it was kind of an important distinction. So I changed the title to what happened to Vine in the past tense, kept the URL the same, continued to update the article as things progressed. And I pretty much just let it sit now for the last 12 to 18 months. And interestingly, to this day, it gets a couple hundred visits every single day. It's still the number one ranking term for what in the world happened to Vine or what happened to Vine. And people apparently want to know that. I still get people commenting to this day that, I had no idea that Vine disappeared or shut down, and went to log into my account and it was gone. So it was an extremely successful post for me for those 2 reasons. Ton of initial interest and engagement, influencer activity, and so on. And then long-term, continued number one ranking, continued organic traffic from Google.
So a couple of, thanks for sharing that, kind of wonderful, I guess, case study there. A couple of follow-up questions. First of all, the traffic, the enormous levels of traffic that you got to that post, did you manage to make any of it sticky and encourage people to come back and be future readers?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I use because of the way that social media hat is organized, it's almost a side project, a side gig for me. That's not my main thing. I'm a brand evangelist for Agorapulse. So that's a fun project for me. I'm not trying to hyper monetize or anything like that. So my main thing with the social media hat is to get email subscribers. So I have a welcome mat that pops down as soon as they hit the site. Right now it's focused on Facebook. I'm not sure if that was the focus when I first published this that particular article, because these things change over the time. And I also have an exit intent pop up now. Again, at the time, I might have also been testing other pop-ups, hello bars, scroll bars, different things like that, because I'm always testing lead generation and lead magnets.
And what kind of call to action, what kind of lead magnet tended to work best?
For that particular one, I think it was my Facebook survival kit. I don't have and never had anything that was Vine specific. It was just too small of a segment of my audience. But even a good portion of those Vine users are certainly Facebook users, businesses, or individuals. And so there's always widespread interest in how do I use Facebook better. So I have an ebook that helps people with that.
Great. And one other question, have you tried to replicate the success that you achieved in that article, in other articles that you've published in the future?
Yes and no. Because of my position now with Agorapulse, I don't publish as often as I used to. That comes with having a full-time job now. I actually have time, and I don't publish 2 or 3 times a day like I might have once before. But definitely the newsjacking component is something I've done over and over and over again. And whenever I'm able to get up in front of a story, like I did with Vine, it's extremely successful. Almost the exact same thing happened with Blab. Dave, I'm sure you remember Blab. I don't know about Craig and Aaron. Blab did the same thing. They were going so well. People were excited to use Blab. They were getting appearances at conferences, and then they decided internally, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to shut it down. And so they just did a blanket announcement. Hey, Blab's going away. So I wrote about that, and it wasn't exact match for match levels of success, but it was still a very successful piece of content. Got a lot of initial shares and awareness.
Great. Let's open it up to the others. And Craig, from an SEO perspective, is there anything that can be tweaked to newsjack more successfully?
Not well, yeah, of course, there's always room for improvement from an SEO point of view, but I think the whole purpose of newsjacking and what's happened there is the timing of it and the amplification from all the kind of other social signals. It's it's not a long article, it's not particular, it's one internal link, one external link on it, it's got a title tag. There's nothing outrageously amazing about the article. It's not got header tags, or it's not particularly well optimized as such, and you wouldn't have header tags in such a short article. But from an SEO point of view, you could always improve it and make the content longer or whatever, but do you have to? Because it's all about the timing, and that's what has happened here, and that's the whole purpose of newsjacking is getting on something and amplifying it all these social signals and everything else, and all that click-through rate is what position, in my opinion, would position an article like that up there, and that's exactly what happened in my opinion. And I don't think you have to be over optimizing it or anything like that. Put it out there, and it's more about the timing.
Interesting. So it's got to be hyper relevant. That hyper relevance will result in much better click-through rate than other things around it, and then that will probably keep it higher than other stuff.
Yeah, in my opinion.
And we've got some great chat going on in the YouTube chat as well. Brian saying this is a great information in regards to Google Ads updates. It's nice to hear take from different perspectives. Kirsten Drysdale saying Blab. I miss it so much. To this day, there are still Blabber groups all over the place and talk about the good old days of Blab. That's incredible. I mean, I loved Blab. I remember hosting an event on Blab where I had over 50 people on there, one after the other. And it was such a wonderful platform for doing that. And it was so great to be able to log in with your Twitter account, and the amount of interaction you had was just superb. Mike's
Yeah, absolutely.
teary-eyed there, yeah, but
little
wistful.
Yeah, just to tag on, to what Craig just said, and I appreciate that commentary. There have been plenty of other newsjacking articles that I've written that within a day or two, the interest is gone, and that's normal. It's like any other news story, right? Where after a certain point, everybody gets it. It's hit mainstream media, whatever the case might be, and there's no longer any interest in that story. What was different about this article and a very select few that I've written in the past is that interest continued. So the point that I would make there is I was paying attention to the metrics, I was paying attention to Google Analytics and Google Trends, and saw an opportunity for me to continue to leverage that interest over time.
Aaron, for an article like this, for essentially opinion about a news story, is there anything that paid search can bring to the table?
I mean, sure, there's things that we can do like content amplification if it's something you really want to get out there. Absolutely, you can certainly promote it with things like Taboola, Outbrain, get a little bit of extra legs on it. What I think made this article very interesting from a newsjacking perspective, it does a couple of things very well. First of all, since it was so sudden and since Vine was such a tight-knit community, there were so many people that made their living as being Vine stars, whatever that meant. There were people who were concerned. That was also right when Twitter's stock was taking a hit. So it had a lot of concerns from investors. So I think what you did really well with this and continue to do really well is you address complex concerns in a simple way. So pointing back to the theories before about marketing to people instead of marketing to keywords, kind of this new era, you sort of did that whether you meant to or not. You wrote the article with people's questions in mind, and gave someone like me who, I think I downloaded Vine and never opened it when it existed. Blab, I don't know what that is. Maybe I haven't been around long enough. But that wasn't meant to be an age wisecrack, so sorry if it was. But I think what made it interesting is that there was enough depth in it that someone like myself or Craig, who know the industry well, could get a lot of new information about it. But it was also simple enough that, a casual reader, someone's like, what's Vine? Where did it go? It was simple enough that they could absorb it as well. From a paid perspective, I've long been an advocate of what I'll call education marketing, sort of capturing those casual readers, the ones who don't really know what's going on. So what you could do with this is feed them into a sequential remarketing list, create a remarketing list on this page based on source. If there are people who are coming direct or from your Twitter feed, they're already your friends, you don't care. But if there are people coming to an education article like this from a source like organic search or maybe a referral source that you wouldn't normally get from the links that came from it, that's a way that you could foster new content and feed new content into people who weren't otherwise your readers. So then you could get them to be brand advocates, even though they might have just come on this article as a happenstance.
Superb. Great few thoughts there. Thanks for sharing them, Aaron. But that just about takes us to the end of our 16th episode. Just time for an actionable tip from each of our guests, related to, or not necessarily related to, what we've been discussing so far, whatever you feel best. So let's go to Craig first. Craig, what is your actionable tip?
Actionable tip to me would be, or from me, and what I'm doing a lot of just now is working on click-through rate manipulation, which obviously goes in tow with reviews and everything else. That is something I'm actively looking at, trying to manipulate to some degree and seeing some great results from it. So it's something you should look at very carefully.
Okay, superb. And you can find Craig over at craigcampbellseo.co.uk. And back to Aaron. Aaron, what is your actionable tip?
It's going to be ironic coming from a paid search guy, but put your sites on a diet. We have so long focused from a paid search perspective, like, the biggest element in quality score is your click-through rate, so mess with your ads. That's true, but that has a stopping point where it stops helping. The biggest factor and biggest success factor that we've seen in helping clients is making their sites load faster. It's become more and more of an important element. So you will be punished if your site loads slow, especially on mobile. So if you haven't run things through the mobile site speed test and you just don't worry about it because it's a paid search landing page, change that mindset and make things a little bit speedier. Get used to the new mobile space because Google's rewarding it.
As Aaron picks up his mobile phone for audio listeners. Lovely. And you can find Aaron over at elitesem.com. And finally, Mike, what is your actionable tip?
Well, I love, Aaron, that you picked up on how I was writing for people and not search engines, because that's really part of my signature style, and it was very deliberate. And that's always my advice, is to try to answer the questions that your target audience is going to have, even if you're just picking a single person and having that one person in mind. And it was actually on this particular article that I got the nicest, best, greatest comment I've ever received from any of my readers over 10 years of blogging. She said she came in like in February, Vine was closed, she didn't know what happened, and she found my article and she started reading. And as she was going through my article, questions were coming up into her mind as to, what she was going to do next and so on. And as soon as she had a question, that was the next question that I actually answered in the article. She said it was though I was reading her mind and writing the article in advance of her reading it. So I thought that was fantastic, because that's exactly what I try to do with my content. And it's something that I always encourage businesses to do with their own content, write for people.
Wonderful advice. And of course, you can find Mike over at thesocialmediahat.com. And Mike, just in terms of the content that you produce and the answers that you try to answer within your content, obviously you can go to a site like answerthepublic.com. Do you do something like that? Or do you just write from the mind, just trying to answer what you think people are looking for?
Yeah, sometimes I'll use a site like that. Sometimes I'll use Quora. More often than not, it'll come out of social media conversations that used to be Google Plus back in the day. Kristen's going to cry a little bit in the audience again. But these days, it's mostly about Facebook groups. That's where a lot of the conversations I'm having with my target audience. Now, obviously, you listening in the audience today to this podcast, your audience may be lurking someplace else. But the key is to be listening to that audience, having conversations, and using that to drive the kind of content that you need to create.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mike. And I've been your host, David Bain. You can also find me over at digitalmarketingradio.com. We will be recording the next episode 17 of Search Marketing Scoop, at the same time, same place, the SEO Rush YouTube channel, on Wednesday, the 19th of September, 1 week's time, when my guests are scheduled to be Jennifer Slegg from the SEM Post and Christy Olsen from Microsoft. In the meantime, thanks not only to Craig, Aaron, and Mike for this episode, but also to you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, subscribe to the audio podcast if you're not already. Just head over to searchmarketingscoop.com and find the link there to your preferred Apple or Android flavor of podcatcher. But until we meet again, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios.